Hello, friends. My name is Steve, and we're here today to talk The Grace of Kings by Ken Lewis, the first book in the Dandelion Dynasty series. Here today with Hans and with Taylor. Hans, will you give us an introduction?
Oh yeah, hello, I'm Hans. I don't really have a YouTube channel anymore. I mostly do stuff on Goodreads and Discord now, but I'm from the Netherlands. I like fantasy, but I haven't read a lot of adult fantasy, so it's always a joy to read with other readers. So thank you for the opportunity to have me around for this one.
Of course. Thanks for coming. And Taylor?
For those who don't know me, my name is Taylor. My YouTube channel is Made Between the Pages, which you can see below. I am a co-host with Steve for Page Doing, so you've probably seen me around the channel before.
Once or twice.
Yeah, maybe every once in a while. Um, the Dandelion Dynasty is one of my favorite series of all time. I'm a big fantasy reader. Can't tell behind me. And Dandelion Dynasty, I just finished Speaking Bones, I think 2 months ago. It is cemented as one of the best I've ever read. So I'm super excited to talk about these books, piece by piece. And yeah, I'm gonna have to. I mentioned before we went live, I'm gonna have to follow you and Hans, your guide for exactly where the plot points stop at the end of Grace of Kings, to keep it, the spoilers within the confines of the first story. But I can't wait to talk about it. I'm such a
Cool.
nerd for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, I think once we start talking, it'll come back and you'll kind of get the feeling for where we stopped first book. But Hans, what were your overall thoughts on this one? And just a quick heads up for everyone listening or watching it, this is spoiler filled. So anything that
Mhm.
happens in the Grace of Kings is fair game. So you've been warned. I'm sorry,
Hmm.
Hans. Go ahead.
No, no. I really enjoyed it. Um, I think what struck me most about this book is that it's not so necessarily about the characters. More so, the characters are like pieces on the chessboard. They move along. It's not about the chess pieces themselves. It's more about the game.
Hmm.
So that struck me as very different in this book, and that's why I liked it as much because it was written very beautifully, and then combined with this concept that I hadn't really encountered before, I thought it was absolutely marvelous. And
Hmm.
I read it in about 10 days. That's very fast for me. So yeah, yeah, I really enjoyed
That's a
it. I
lot of
give it.
pages to tackle in 10 days. That's impressive.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think I read about 120 pages in the last day, so
Mm.
it flew over.
The Sky is here. Yay for the Netherlands.
Oh, Sarah. Yay, Sarah. Thanks for stopping by. She's also read, I think, the first 2 books at this point.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Pop and stuff. It ended with Cooney getting coronated and the gods having a party.
Gotcha.
If that rings a
Okay.
bell. Yeah.
It does ring a bell.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hobbit Hole Books is here, popping in quick to say hi. I can't wait to read this book. I love, I love, love to you all. I had to read that for a second. Good morning. Bye.
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 Yeah.
Thanks for stopping by.
Yeah. Thanks for coming in. Thankfully, we didn't spoil you. Hopefully, we didn't spoil you in anything. But yeah, I was surprised how much happens. And it is a thick book, but a lot happens. There's a lot that, especially the characters go on they evolve quite a bit through the course of
Mhm.
the whole book.
Yeah, and they even get kids, and the kids grow up a little, so it's like almost 10 years, I think. Maybe it felt like 10 years, but maybe it was a little bit less, but yeah, a lot happens.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I love so much about Ken Liu's writing is that he has these large scale, like you mentioned, chess piece like movements of, culture and societies, but at the same time we view it through the lens of these characters that you come to care about, like Kuni and Matazindu.
Mhm.
Like you really know the characters well, even though it has this large scale to it as at the same time. I think it's really an accomplishment by the author to be able to do that. Because
Mhm.
I really cared about the characters a lot.
Mhm.
Yeah, even the bad
Yeah.
ones I cared about. Well, they were. I guess none of them are. They're all gray, but they all have to do things they don't necessarily want to do. But I love the way that they evolve, and I think that's a great way to describe it. Hans is chess pieces. That's a perfect way to say it.
Yeah, and I think the way we were allowed to care about these characters is that their backstory was introduced right before they made a big decision or a big movement in the main story. So you weren't bothered with any sort of information long beforehand. You got the information about someone being forced into prostitution or being forced into a gang with people that got kids' hands off right before they make a big movement. And even if the big movement only was 2 3 pages in general, the way that they were introduced just made you care about that decision because they were given such a beautiful backstory just before.
Hmm. And one of my favorite things is that it's the small actions of all the little small actions of all the characters that lead to the big chess moves, right? So all the small choices Kuni made when he was basically just like a little shithead, like a con man. All those little choices he made led him to meet Matazindu, right? So I like how it's like compounds over time, and yeah, I mean, how did you guys feel? I mean, it feels weird to go full on spoilers because I feel like we've already did the warning, but just warning, flashing lights if you're still here. But how did you guys feel about the perceived betrayal between the two of them? Between Kuni and I say perceived because you could argue whether it was truly a betrayal or not, but between Kuni and Mata.
I think if I can go first, I think it's a very. I'm still not decided upon it, and I finished this book almost a week ago. Like, um, it felt like a betrayal, but it also felt like Mata just did so much bad stuff that I sometimes feel like it's justified by Kuni to do this, but it's still not even a bag. So it's like it's unethical and not very righteous of him. But I think it's one of the best gray moments in the entire book, and leaving it there. Probably at the time that it released, it caused a lot of discussion to spur up, and that's always good for a book, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think everyone reading it kind of went back and forth or has an opinion on it, on whether it was the right move or not. I think what it comes down to is was he redeemable? Could Kuni have influenced him or led him on a different path, or is there? Uh, 'Cause they had both done so much by that point that you, and then you have they all have people influencing their decisions too, what they should be doing, and they just. So I did like the contrast between the two. That one was more about strength and power and force, and the other one was more tactical. I guess look for different ways of solving problems.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it was this.
Yeah. Go ahead, Hans.
Oh, it was also this contrasting methods of tackling the same problem that continuously drove the story forward because he was zigzagging between the two, and Mata didn't believe the method that Kuni used was actually humane or actually honorable, while Kuni didn't care either way. So it was interesting that back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
Our friend Paramita's here. Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening. Yolene is here. Hey guys, I'm sad I won't be able to stick around, but I look forward to watching this tonight.
Hey, Yolene, if you're still here.
And Shad is here. Hello, everyone. Or hello, Shad. Paramita says, I read it back in May, so forgotten how many names, but I remember liking the second half much more. First half felt a little info dumpy. There is a lot. I think Dara in itself is a character because it's so rich, and I think that set up time to make it feel like a character is one of the reasons people feel like it's really information heavy in the first. Wasn't too bad. What I struggled with was the names. I would lose track of names. There's a lot of names. So, what did you both think about that?
Well, I definitely hear the point here that it's when I first picked it up. I'm very. I don't want to toot my own horn, but pretty experienced with adult fantasy, and even I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to write down some of these names. I'm gonna have to, it was extremely large in scope from the very beginning. And I think that can feel info dumpy in and of itself, even if it's delivered through not just exposition, but through characters and through action, just the scope can feel overwhelming. And I do remember feeling, getting to the second part of it, like, okay, I'm rolling here. I know these characters. I don't need to check it. So I think for me, it was more once I became actually comfortable with the world, then it flowed for me. Not necessarily that the writing itself was infodumpy for me personally. It was just me kind of getting settled was my experience.
What did you think, Hans? Did you?
Sorry, what did you want?
Oh no!
did you want
Did
to
you
say?
feel? Did you feel like there was a lot of information or characters?
I didn't actually. I found it. There is a lot of characters, but I stopped caring about remembering all of them, especially as there was the list on the front. Like, just if you read an history book, it's like sometimes the names themselves don't really matter. It's more the general idea of them. So maybe it's not caring about the names. It's more like letting them pause, and if they come back up again, then you start to remember them. So yes, there was a lot of names, and the map and the list of the characters in the front of the book probably helped me a lot, because I normally have a lot of problems remembering names anyways. So that was a good thing for me. But personally, I didn't really feel like it didn't took me very long to get into the world and the story.
Yeah, it does drop you right into it. It doesn't. I think that's part of why I think some people feel like it is a lot. It's a lot of building, but it does not waste any time getting you into the swing of things.
Well, I think also what might feel infodumpy, Kuni, yeah, it's a great character. It's something that might feel infodumpy as well as the amount of time that Lou spends on the engineering of the world. Not just the engineering, but like the mechanics of the world, and making sure that you understand what the language is like and how it functions, and how technology is evolving and where exactly we are in that evolution, right? So I think that can also maybe feel a bit infodumpy to someone if they're not used to an author really delving in and taking the time with that. Like you said, they throw you in the beginning, right? The first scene is the parade, right? And then we get all the details of the flying kite coming in with bombs. You get details already with that. So he's just like, this is what I'm going to do, guys. I hope you like it,
Yeah.
from the first scene.
And in that regard, it might be that this book is especially made for those people. Like, it's made for the people that like this sort of concept. And he makes it very clear from the beginning. Because I agree, and I read a few things about the book afterwards, and he calls it a separate genre, a silkpunk, I believe, and it was rooted around the idea of the engineering and the primarily materials used. Like, we in the Western world use a lot of stone and wood and metals, but in their culture they use shells and bamboo and very different materials that they have there. So. And as a person, I am not always a character-driven reader. I'm more so a world-driven reader, or a person that's driven by the changings in the world and how world building is done. So I was like, this is exactly like my kind of story.
I also did the little giggle. I was like, ooh,
Yeah,
I
the little
realized what we were
raccoon.
getting. Exactly. But the way that it's funny, the way you mentioned how you handled names is how I handled the engineering parts of the book. So I'd be like, I didn't understand exactly what that meant, but I'm sure I'll figure it out later. Like, that's because I'm a linguistics nut. So when the language parts came up, going into the logograms and the details of those, I wanted to understand every sentence. But for the engineering, I'm like, I think I got enough of I think I understood most of that.
Yeah.
Dr. Puff and stuff says it was a Lemony Snicket moment, an unfortunate event. Yeah. Shot said I was sad to see Cooney and Mata their partnership had to be ended. Yeah, it was a little sad after they had been through so much together, and then they had this back and forth. But I guess if someone takes your family hostage for years at a time, it's hard to
Yeah.
hard to go back from that.
Right.
Yeah, and
Like,
this,
go ahead.
it was like a classic moment of at the beginning, neither of them did really something different, so really something wrong, but it was more so their ways of life that drove them apart, and then later they started backstabbing each other. But at the beginning, it wasn't really one person that made the big decision to separate from the other one. It was only the difference in how they approach the situations.
Hmm.
I think it's definitely approach, and also what I find sticks with me on reflection of the book is how Mata was seen as more heroic or necessary during wartime. But then once wartime ended, he was no longer the person that should have been in power, most people believed, right? Because of the way he
Mhm.
was handling things, because of the warlike tactics. So the difference between leaders during wartime and peacetime was something that really stuck out to me at the end there, as to why maybe, yeah, like you said, they've both done so much, so you can't really say who is right or wrong. But why I was kind of like, kind of glad Cooney did that. Part of me was like, yeah, because his leadership style no longer fits what the world is. It's not in the state of war. So,
Mhm.
which it seems unfair, to use and abuse someone and then just be like, yeah, we don't need you anymore. But
Yeah,
that is kind of some of the vibes I got.
yeah. And I would not have liked to see what the world would have become if Mata would have been the emperor. Like, it would probably have been very bad for the people that were, for example, creatively focused. Like, Mata created a world that didn't really appreciate the artistic beauty, and even though he appreciated the artistic beauty of his partner, he didn't really appreciate it in anyone else. If someone wasn't military adept or physically strong, then they should be thrown away because there's more space for the people that are. And, yeah. I would not have liked to see the world that would have become out of this actually.
It seemed like it was on a path of being worse than what was before. Like where
Mhm.
they had gone backwards instead of forwards. Because I love when stories examine or explore the idea of is the war the easy part, and then once you are in power, once you can rule, then how do you do that? That's really difficult because you have little control over how people react to what you're doing or everyone else who's influencing you, and what people expect, because some people are used to the way things used to be, and now it's a big change and it takes generations. So all that's really I love that that Ken Liu explored that part of it.
Oh, Steve, you're gonna love the other three books. Let me just say, like, those are just, you're gonna love them. Yeah, very well explored. Um,
And
but
without
yeah.
without you going into spoilers, I don't know what the next book's about, but I read that it's a little bit like Dune in the concept that it's not mainly that's generational. That it's not really focusing on the same characters every book.
Yeah, so he does a lot of, like, that chess overarching like feel of the book is the same in the other books, in that we have large time jumps and generational jumps, but it's not that the characters that we got to know disappear. It's just that there's a different focus, or they have a different role in the previous books. And then something that Ken Liu pointed out when we interviewed him, which I think really is a good explanation for how it changes in the later books, is that this first book is kind of like the lore. It's setting up the lore and the history and the epic stories of this world, of Dara. And we get to see how in later books it's referenced in the way that other people might reference heroic stories in their culture. So it's kind of got this setup feel to it, where you now know the basis of the history and what people are referencing as a reference point for the future generations. So it kind of sets that up. And then the
Hmm.
previous books build off of what you've gotten in this first book. But it does feel more epic scale. The whole thing is epic scale, but it feels more like an epic story, I think, than the later books in that sense.
And our friend Esme is here. She's just popping in to say hi. Caught the virus, so I feel absolutely miserable, but I'm 100% going to watch this back. Have a great chat, friends. Oh, hope you're feeling okay. Hope you
Feel better, Esme.
hang in there.
Mm.
Shots that I enjoyed reading about Cooney and Mata relationship, and it was interesting reading about it. They were opposites in so many ways.
Mm-hmm. Foils for each other, I would argue.
Mm-hmm. Daniel said, it's interesting how Ken Liu can do all of that grand scale work so quickly. Other people have done similar things, but it tends to take them a lot more pages. That's a great point. That's a really good point. Because this felt like more than one book, or more than one book worth of world and events. There's a lot of back and forth during the whole book. There's a lot of things happen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a great contrast to the other fantasy series that I explored this year, and that was the Stormlight Archive, because that book feels a lot slower. Like the two books that I read from that series this year are about the same size of scope of this book, because it takes a lot more pages to just tell the world, and that's just two different approaches, which is okay. But yeah, I agree that it felt very fast in this book.
You know, something that literally just occurred to me during this discussion, but I think part of what might allow Ken Liu to do that is the point of view he has of the gods, right? So the gods know things conveniently that characters can't know, right? So it's a lot easier to not just use them for exposition. I'm not saying he does that, but it's a lot easier to give a broader scale to something when you have an omnipotent being like, oh yeah, you know, that place is over there and they worship us and they don't, you know, like that. That's kind of helpful to give you scope. Whereas maybe with like the Stormlight Archive, we are only dealing with point of views that go from small to big. We don't really get an overarching point of view, at least in the Way of Kings. So that just popped into my head. I don't know if I'm not an author, so I don't know if that's like a writing device you can use to achieve that goal, but it seems like it would be useful.
It is a good point. And that added a whole nother layer of what was happening and how they were being influenced, and they're just kind of pointing people in a certain direction and seeing what happens. So it was a whole nother layer of the story. What did you think about that, Hans, about the gods meddling?
Like it's the most confusing part of the story for me, because with them you really need to remember who's which and stuff, and it's not like those are the Greek gods that we know. That one is for the water, and that one is for the agriculture. So that part was a little bit confusing, and it was also confusing in the sense that each of the gods protected the characters that they were under their influence, so they didn't really care about different lands that didn't worship them. They were like, "Oh, f those guys, they can die." So it was really interesting to have that point of view, and I agree that it added a lot of clarity to the moments that were happening, but it's also a little bit confusing, and I assume it's going to continue in the next books, so we'll probably get some answers. But yeah.
I mean, meddling gods are just, you know, that's just, if someone tells me there are meddling gods in a world, I'm like, so where's my copy, right? So for me, it's really easy to get me with that. But it's interesting because so much happens in this book that I find almost in most discussions, you don't get a chance to talk about that aspect of the book because there's so much else to talk about, so much else that happens. But yeah, I think it's pretty funny to see gods bickering amongst each other, or just being like, you know, like you said, you don't believe in me, so all right, I'm not going to help you. You can die over there, and I'll, you know, deal with the people who believe in me. So yeah, I find that so fun when authors play with that. So, and it does continue. So
Yeah, me too. And one thing I wonder about his part is that you had one of. Wait, I have the book here. I have to remember his name. But you had one upper the big deity, like the leader of the deities. But he was also from Xana, where the emperor came from. So I wonder now that Xana is gone as the leader of the world, that he is also going away as the leader of the deities. That's what I'm remembering. Wait, what's the name?
I just
Kiji.
realized I left my phone right out of range. I was going to Google that, but I'm like,
Yeah, Kiji, the one with the eagles as the
yeah,
animals.
right. Why can't I think of his name right now? I mean, I shouldn't be surprised. I can't remember the names of people I just met, but
Yeah, his name is Kiji.
Kiji, there we go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's in the book. So I wonder how that plays out. Felt like there was some kind of mirroring that the leader of the deities was also the leader of the world at that moment. So I wonder if that's going to change in the future.
My lips are sealed.
Dr. Puffin Stuff says there was a moment when Mata rode in on an airship and stormed Cooney's town while Cooney's armies fought dummies, but when he did it, it was full of honor.
Yeah, if he did it, it was honorable, right? That's the way
Yeah.
that works.
Yeah.
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 Very relative concept.
Yeah. Daniel says, for example, Les Mis has introductions to characters right before they enter the story, explaining their backstory and such, but it tends to drag a little. Yeah, that kind of sometimes hurts the flow of the story when there's the introduction or the feeling out period for you.
Mm-hmm.
And Sky5 Angel says a lot of reviewers criticize the absence of women. What do you guys think? Because I disagree. I feel like Ken Liu knows how to write women. What did you guys think about that one? About the absence of women?
Well, I mean, I can go first.
Sure.
It's hard for me to just talk about the first book because I view it as a whole. But if I do think about the way I felt, I think even from the first book, I disagree completely with that. I think that just because the two main characters we followed were male in this installment doesn't mean that the women in the story didn't play important roles or weren't done justice. So is this the one? I'm pretty sure this is the story where the young goddess of beauty, the young girl that was chosen by, I can't remember names. There's a young girl who is the favorite of the goddess of beauty and youthfulness, and she has a tragic.
That doesn't strike as familiar. So
yeah, it doesn't
all right, so I won't go there. But there. So yeah, I think I disagree very strongly with this critique because I think that Gia is a very good example. What she did when she was held by Mata was huge, and Cooney could not have done what he did or been coronated without her work. And so I think Ken Liu does an amazing job writing multifaceted women that are not just, they don't just have one place in the story, and they're also gray characters, and they are in different situations in society. So I think that I never had an issue with it, and I think he's phenomenal at it personally. I think Gia is a fantastic character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought Gia was one of the maybe the most important character in the war, because she, what she did really changed the path and the course of events. So I didn't even consider that. I hadn't heard that that was a criticism, but I didn't. Nothing stuck out to me when I was reading it.
No, me neither, because the two of the three most important side characters in my eyes are woman. You have the wife of Cooney, and then his general in the army that is featured in the latter half of the book, that are probably some of the most important. And so I disagree as well. It's not the main characters are no female, but the most important side characters are, and I think that as long as they have a position in the story and in the world, then it's all right.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, and I think also, like I said, they are in different positions in society and working within the structure that's been established in society, right? So his general is, oh my God, I should have looked up names before this. I feel horrible. But his general is not, no one accepts her, or she doesn't think
Mhm.
anyone is going to accept her, right? So I think that the women work well and are well positioned within the framework of the world that has been set up. I think there's no problem with that.
Shaw said, I love Luan. What a
Mhm.
fantastic way to introduce a character."
Luan Ziadji, yes. As a teacher,
Mm.
oh my God, he's just my favorite.
But
Go ahead, Hans.
Luan is the one, the kite bomber as well, right?
The what?
The kite bomber at the beginning of the parade.
Yes.
He was on, yeah.
That's Luan, yeah. Mhm.
And then he appears several hundred pages later.
Yeah. Remember me, right?
Yeah. Dr. Puff and stuff. I did that to the Boeing. The sitting positions simply ignored the intricacies.
Mhm.
Mm.
The bowing, yeah.
Mhm.
I
I
mean,
think that's
mm,
that's the amount of detail you want in the story. If you don't really care about that, then you can just skip it. It's not like you're missing stuff. It's just that the world isn't as lush if you skip it.
mhm. That's a good point.
Dr. Puff and stuff says the God scenes grew on me more and more through the book, but I think I prefer Erickson's gods and Ascendant still.
I don't have a reference to compare that to, but
Is Erickson Stevens from Malazan?
Malazan? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised in the middle how it was almost like reading a historical account or like a history book with all the different things that happened, all the different battles and all the different strategies. So I was a little bit surprised how battle heavy it was in the middle. Were you guys surprised by that too?
Hmm. Yeah, when I think back on it, it didn't seem incongruous or anything, but yeah, there's a lot of large scale battles that I guess you don't necessarily get the feel that it's going to be that way in the beginning. So yeah, I
Mhm.
can see why it would feel like, oh, I wasn't expecting this to be a military fantasy.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah, but as to, compared to what's it called? The one with the Phoenix girl from Ara
Phoenix
Quang.
Girl.
From Ara
Oh,
Quang.
the Poppy War. The Poppy
Yeah, the
War.
Poppy War and the scene in the Two Towers from Lord of the Rings. Those are the primary battle scenes I have. These felt a lot faster. He didn't really waste a lot of time on the actual battling, and this person hit this person with a sword, and then this person hit this one with a spear, and he
Yeah.
skipped over all of that. He just presented the battle as a sort of summary, as if it already happened, and you just give a sort of report on the end of it. So in that aspect, maybe there were a lot of battles, but they didn't feel boring to me because he used the important moments of that battle and the geography of the city and the surrounding landscape to sort of pinpoint the important details of the battle, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that the kind of overview of events added to the scale or the scope of the story. It added to that feeling of where it's a wide lens that we're looking through. So I think that contributed to feeling that large scale story.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely agree. And the blow, not having so much of the blow by blow is an interesting way to handle, because that's not really what's trendy now. A lot of fantasy is like blow by blow. For example, Shadow of the Gods. This is every sword hit is detailed in every battle in this book, and that's pretty much what's popular nowadays. So
Yeah.
it's a brave move.
I think it takes a lot of talent to write a battle scene like that. That's a blow by blow and make it interesting. But I just
Mhm.
not the kind of battles I like to read about. I kind of skim over those unless it's written in a certain way.
And I think
I just looked up the name Gin Mazzotti. That's the name of the general. That was bothering
yes.
me. Apologies. Continue, Hans.
No, that's okay. I think the blow by blow account would have felt really out of place in this story as well. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, he does vary the style in the later ones as well. Some of them are large scale, like epic. Like I said, these are, I think, supposed to be more lore, kind of. So they become this story that generations tell each other. So maybe that's purposeful to have them, viewed from above. So
yeah, and it's really interesting how like the lore building. I forgot what I was gonna say. Carry on. I forgot what I was gonna say.
this comment's referring to the tragic story I was talking about. Kikomi, actually, I think is the name. Does that ring a bell for you guys? Kikomi?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's the story that I was talking about.
Oh, that one. Wait, now I remember. I had to read it in the list of the names. The princess from the bamboo island.
Yeah. So okay, so I was like, I swear that was in the first book. But yeah, a lot of people when they complain about women in the story, they complain about her end, and how she basically had to do a sacrifice no one's going to know about, right? And just throw her life away and all of that potential. But I think the point was to show the tragedy of that. I think it was it was rough, but a very poignant story to show.
And it was
The
interesting
position.
because because it felt inconsequential to the world, and people didn't really care about who this name was, but for the persons that affected it, it became major, became their life-changing event. So it sacrificed getting globally known to getting personally impactful. So I felt that was a really good trade as well. Yes.
Shows the ripples of war, right? So even though she wasn't a general or, wasn't in any of the main battles, the war ruined her life. And that is the way that a lot of people's lives go, right? If you're not considered the hero of the story, it doesn't mean it doesn't affect you. So I think it was a really impactful statement on the ripple effects. Places that are supposed to be paradises or, off the map, even those places are affected. Kikomi,
Yeah. That's what.
Yeah.
Daniel was up. We have two Daniels. Dr. Puff and stuff is also Daniel, but he was up till 3 a.m. finishing the book. It was close. He had 150 pages to go yesterday, so I guess he made it.
Oh my God, impressive.
I feel it. That was Leslie for me as well.
Yeah. Daniel says, I felt like an engineer wrote the book, not in a bad way, but the speed of the plot points in the way that it was told.
Yeah, like I'm an artist as well, so I draw a lot. So with the way he described stuff, I felt like I could draw an accurate representation of the thing he described, and I feel like that's a very rare thing in books. They just pinpoint normally the details, so people have a general idea for what you're going for. But with these, it sometimes even felt like you could draw the exact blueprint of a certain machine or design.
That's interesting to hear you mention that, because I'm not artistic even at all. Like, I can visualize general shapes, but that must be so fun, if you have that kind of the mind that can do something like that. It'd be like a picture.
Yeah, and primarily the airships, because that was one of the most explained things. So like he explained how they were filled and where you can find the gas and how many people were on the Zeppelins, because it were essentially Zeppelins, and how they were built. So I really enjoy details like that.
I've heard him say that he wrote an epic fantasy where the heroes weren't the warriors, but the engineers. So I've heard him say like that's part of what his goal is. So
Yeah,
I think he achieves that
that's
goal.
that's a detail that's different from other fantasies, because there's almost no fantasies where either an assassin, a warrior, or a magician, those archetypes are either the heroes. So it's rare to find these one of the archetypes that's not in these three categories to be the hero, especially in an engineer or a smarty pants,
Yeah,
a bookish person.
he's doing it for all of us, the ones in the
Yeah,
background everywhere, right?
yeah.
I can kind of understand that though, because um, you know, when an example that I tend to use is with NASA. So my dad is responsible for the James Webb Space Telescope, and his team has worked for like 30 years on this thing. And then who
Mhm.
gets to talk about it and announce it? The head of NASA, who hasn't lifted one stinky
Yeah,
finger to work
yeah.
on this project. And yet the people that I happen to know personally who put their blood, sweat, and tears into it are like the smart people, the engineers in the background, you know, and they never get recognition on the broad scale for their work. So maybe this is kind of a love letter to that, and Kenlu reminding us, hey, you know, the things that heroes use, us, the, you know, bookish people, a lot of us make those. Maybe
Mhm.
that's, you know, serving that function as well. I have no idea, but it's a possibility.
Mhm. Yeah.
And what we do with power when we get it is another thing that was a strong theme for me. And this one is
Mhm.
just, you know, because you do all that fighting and all that sacrifice, and then you get there, and then it's, are you gonna hand it over to someone who can do things better than you can, or are you gonna hold on to it thinking you can rule and conquer? Because they're two different things.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Yeah.
and especially with the amount of peasants or low-born that were given power. We have these two rebel leaders in the beginning that start to Humo and Shiken or something like that. That start to work together, but then one betrays the other, and then that one gets totally destroyed by greed, and in the end, he doesn't even become a major character. He just dies, and because of his own greed, and it was various moments like that that really made the yeah, that really made that team important about how you handle power. So
Mm-hmm. You know, who can handle the grace of kings, you know, who can carry that mantle, you know,
yeah,
it's a heavy burden, right? So I think that's a really good point, the idea of what power can do to a person when you get it, but
hmm
also what does holding power really mean?
Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
is it is it something you really want in the end?
hmm
You know,
indeed,
Yeah.
kind of makes you question. Because what
yeah,
Cooney had to do and how he changed, is he for the better? Like I remember feeling nostalgic for like the little, you know, smart ass thieving Cooney. You know, at the end I was like, oh, well that person is gone.
Hmm.
Like
yeah,
we're never gonna get that character back. And it kind of made me sad to see that a little bit.
yeah. And in some ways, the theme of the flowers comes even up more, because Kuni really feels like a dandelion whose seeds have blown into the wind, and the little weed is all that remains. And it was interesting that they continuously use the comparisons of the dandelion and the chrysanthemum. Is that the way you pronounce it? The chrysanthemum in, in 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 this story, because the chrysanthemum is very slow growing and relentless, and the dandelion is very fast growing and changing, and able to grow in a lot of harsh conditions. And I feel like they Gan Liu choose two very important plans in that regard to signify these characters, because, as you said, he changed a lot in the end, and
Mm.
I really enjoyed that part as well.
I like that point about fast growing and versatile versus like, you know, slow growing and one final product. Because for me, I know that chrysanthemums in most Asian, at least in Japanese and Chinese like history or just in general in culture, are viewed as like a royal flower, very beautiful, very mm, ethereal almost in their
Mhm.
beauty, and revered for that. Whereas a dandelion, no one gives a shit, right? You just you mow
Yeah.
them in the lawn, you step on them, but they do always come back. So that's a really good point that you made of it, being quick growing. I never thought of that before. I think that's
Hmm.
a really good point, because Mata was very much a heroic figure from history, right? Who wouldn't want to be that figure, right? Because that's who we always
Mhm.
talk about in stories, but he's not the one who succeeded in the end. It was the dandelion, right?
Mhm. Exactly.
That's a very
Exactly.
good point.
Yeah.
Stu's face, he's like, yeah, maybe.
Well, I was just thinking about how Mato would even they would trying to remember the good times when he and Kuni were together, and they were kind of, even though they weren't they didn't always see eye to eye, because Mata was always surprised with how casual Kuni was, and how he didn't really, people weren't really showing him respect. And it goes back to their different philosophies and how they lived and how they wanted to rule. But going back to those better times and just kind of like, can we go back to that? Can we just forget all this happened and just have peace? And can you go back? I mean, can you forget what's happened and go back to just having a good time and not and trusting each other? I don't know if you can after all the events that happened.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that you can't. I don't think
Yeah.
I could.
No,
I
it's
wouldn't be able
it's
to do that.
it's like the losing of innocence in a way that all these moments really made them impossible to go back to a more innocent time, like growing up, actually growing a little bit older and wiser. But at what cost did we grow older and wiser?
Hmm.
Hmm. Yeah. And bringing back the concept of power too, the idea of power corrupting, right? So you're getting older, you're seeing how power really moves in the world, and it's no longer this conceptual thing. It's something that you have, and you know, it can
Yeah,
really
and
it can really mess things up.
then in a scary way, how people that don't trust other people and only trust themselves want to keep that power for themselves, like Mada did in the end, and the Emperor did in the past, um, when it was not really needed, actually. Because Mada wants to keep the power to themselves and keep the power to his own person, and it was really scary to have him hand out titles to people that didn't really know a lot about governing people, but also people that were good warriors and were good at mowing other people down with an axe or a sword instead of governing. That was scary, especially in the way he divided the map. Yeah, it mirrored a lot of uh, world history of our times, that like in Korea or in the American states, like the way that they were chosen with a ruler, like, oh, this specific position is good for you and this specific position is good for you, without concern for any of the people that actually cared about the lands that were governed just to keep the power to one big person that didn't trust other people.
Hmm. But could you trust
Yeah.
anyone? Could you trust? I mean, if
Hmm.
after yes, it's
Well, I think that's real interesting, because at the same time, you can understand why Mata did what he did, because he was giving it to people who he felt deserved it, who he felt he could trust, right? So he said, well, all of these politicians didn't do anything to win this war. I, myself, and my soldiers and the sacrifices we made are the ones who did this. So we deserve this. And you can kind of see where he might be coming from there. It's not good for governing, but you can understand why someone might make that choice of being like, well, I fought beside you and people we mutually respected died in front of our eyes. I'm going to give you a reward.
hmm.
You can see why he might want to
Hmm.
do that.
Yeah. And
Not
in
that
no
he should,
point,
but
no, but in no point of the story was one of them portrayed as the true villain. Maybe at the very end, but then still you feel like it's Kree territory. Like at every moment in the story, it was optional for you to choose which side was best and which side did the right thing. It was a sort of gray area.
mm. Well, that I guess that's a good question. Oh, you can do this one first. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's
Daniel says, "Does absolute power corrupt?" Absolutely. That's what I wonder the whole time too. Kuni will be the test. At times times of peace are boring to read about. These guys would agree, I think.
Yes, especially Kazu, right? The god of chaos. He's not gonna
Yeah,
like that.
No.
gods
No.
gods thrive in turmoil, in times of turmoil.
Yeah, I mean, when do people pray? When they're suffering, right? Or when they're in strife. They have a motivation
Hmm.
to want that. So, um, yeah, Kuni is the test. I'm really excited to hear what you guys think of the test eventually. He is the test. So
I like how careful you're being.
I don't want to give anything away because when I tell you the plot twists and just the way it can, I don't want to give anything away. You guys should experience it. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm so excited. But my question for you guys was, Hans, you mentioned the Poppy War, and I know Steve, you're into dark things and gray characters. So I'm curious for you guys how the grayness of this world or these characters compared to or lived up to or matched other characters or worlds that you've enjoyed before. Because for me, the detail with which we understand the motivations of the characters made their grayness more impressive to me than other fantasy books I've read that have like great characters or grim circumstances. I just felt for some reason, maybe it's just Ken Liu's writing works for me, but these great characters really stuck out to me as like, wow, this is what's possible. To have like a both sides are not right or wrong kind of situation. So I'm just wondering for you guys, did it stick out to you or like how did you feel about that?
Good, Hans. Want to take this one?
Yeah, it's a good question actually because I haven't read a lot of adult fantasy yet.
Oh, okay.
For me, it's a very new genre, so great characters are not as common to me as they were before. Like I can compare it. Maybe most of the stories I've read mostly feature people that go from that have a very clear stance against an evil point. So for me, it was eye-opening in how it can be gray and how gray you can go with characters because at no point I felt like one was evil and one was good. It was also almost always people affected by the changes in life and in the situations and the changes of life. So for me, it was really good. Yeah, one of the few very first instances I've read of a truly great characters appearing in a story.
I can say you've started from a very high standard. So personally, I believe.
Yeah, that could be good or bad.
Right?
Yeah. I love the characters. I think that these kind of conversations and your thought process while you're reading it, these are the stories that stick with you because you think about them long after you're done with them and the decisions that were made, and I think over time your opinion may change on what decisions were right or which were wrong, or even as you go through the series, you may look at the events of this first book and change your mind about the decisions that were made. But I love the characters. I thought they were great. I would much rather prefer these kind of characters than a more like a defined black and white good and evil. So I love the characters are some that I'll always remember.
Yeah. Also, just hearing you guys talk about like the events of the story and how the end was kind of a shock to you. Of course, there's no right or no wrong, but would you have predicted that Kuni would be coronated? I mean, if you had to, in the beginning, what was your inkling? Because I know for me, I was like, I don't know, this world kind of feels almost too not grim. It's definitely not grimdark. Is not what I'm trying to say, but like a dark world where logic can prevail, except if the gods decide that it shouldn't. But I thought maybe the revolution might fail, and we would be ending the book almost back where we started, almost cyclical. If I had to guess, like in the beginning, what might have happened. So I'm curious for you guys, did you have an inkling like, yeah, Kuni might be successful here, or?
I was shocked by how fast they overthrew the emperor. Like I was thinking that might be the end of the book actually, but it was like 1/3 of the book. So
Mm.
that regard. But once I had to choose between Mata and Kuni, I would more so have guessed for Kuni to rule than for Mata to rule. But that was only after they overthrew the emperor already. I wouldn't have thought that. When I started the book, I thought that maybe that would happen at the end of the book.
Mm.
I would, my prediction or what I expected to happen was just an endless cycle of revolutions and wars and someone else trying to overthrow or one of their close advisors doing something to try and take power. Because once you start tipping that scale and you start kind of going back and forth, then where does it end? Like making, having that end is the hard part. And ruling, like we were talking about, like ruling and how to stop everything, the world from teetering. Because once it starts teetering, people see opportunity. They can try and take power for themselves. Because everyone has the right. Everyone thinks that their methods are the right way until they have the chance to actually rule or to lead, and then it's different. That's not as easy as it may seem.
Mm-hmm.
I think we already got glimpses of that with the general not choosing to follow Kuni in the end. So probably think they're gonna expand on that in the future.
And Mata had an epic death. Yes.
He did. He did have a death worthy of his person, I think. Going
Very
on
sad.
fighting.
Very sad for the two brothers, though. The one that followed Mata, that slit his throat just after Mata himself.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think he couldn't have died any other way. Like if he died by assassination or anything else, like it would have been disappointing for the reader, for his character, for everything. Like he had to die fighting in some capacity, you know? Like of old age on a throne for Mata? Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
No.
No.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he could have. I don't think he could have made it. I don't think, even in people in history, people who are involved in so much violence, they rarely survive to older ages and come out at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one thing that also struck me as interesting is that, like, Kuni and his wife really made sure to have babies in a literal sense. Like they had people to follow the throne, even if his first wife didn't survive with the children. He had a second wife, a concubine with children that could survive, and Mata didn't really care about that any of that. He had a person that could court him and that could. He had a lot of ladies that were interested in him, but he always kept them at bay. There's also a like Mata was very focused on the here and now and on the first few, maybe on tomorrow or next week, but he wasn't focused on years ahead stuff that Kuni was already thinking about.
Well, what's interesting too is if you really think about it, though, it was Gia who was thinking about that. Kuni wasn't.
Yeah,
But Gia said, "Look, you need to get you a second wife because you need to secure our work." And you know that logical forward thinking is something you usually don't see. So again, I don't know how people think that the women here aren't written well because I have never read another character like that where she's like, logically, look, man, you got to be having babies with someone else because right now we can't be doing that. So I think that shocked me as a reader where I was like, wow, okay, all right, Gia, you know? So if you think about it, like she's the one who made sure they did that. And Kuni's like, I mean, I guess, you know?
yeah.
Sure.
So, right? So, like, having a partner like that to push you and see what you can't see might be one of the other reasons, too. that he is where he is, because he didn't have as much forethought as she did.
Oh no, yeah, he wouldn't have made it nearly as long as without her. She was the brains of the operation there for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
100%.
Jano says Kikomi was a dark moment. I did feel all the characters were really nuanced, but the overall tone seemed more positive to me, despite all the dark details. Maybe the childish gods offset it. The childish gods offset it. They did a little bit of levity to it. Well, it was they were meddling and they did add some levity to the story, and just hearing their commentary and them watching what was happening and kind of meddling here and there. And you always wondered whenever a strange character would appear or a beggar or somebody, then they were trying to win the favor. You always wondered if it was the gods or if it was just a random person. So that was a whole nother thing.
An
Yeah.
actual beggar. It's kind of like, oh, is it? You know?
For the longest time, I thought the caretaker, Soto, like what
Soto?
ended up, what ended up being Martha's family, that she was one of the deities, one of those volcano and glacier sisters. That she was one of those. I thought that for the longest moment.
Plot twist, right? I loved Soto as well. Oh, I didn't mean to open that. Did have, I didn't mean to. But yeah, I really enjoyed Soto as well. Her and Gia make an interesting team, I would say. Yeah.
So it does make sense because I wasn't sure if the series would continue, or if we'd have. I didn't even consider having time jumps, so that makes more sense that this first book is kind of the groundwork for history.
Yeah. And I would say a lot of the themes that you guys have been talking about, power and cyclical nature of things, and how not that power corrupts, but that it's difficult and it's a mantle to hold, and what really is the answer? Because when you get into the nitty-gritty of things, is there an answer? And also themes of colonization. You talked earlier about splitting up lands, right? Like Mata was doing. He's like, well, that is no longer yours, that is mine, and we decide the line is here. That's also a huge theme throughout the series as well, is the spoils of war, right? So what you choose.
What happens after war as well? I can imagine that's being a focus of the next story.
Yeah, I'm not gonna get into detail, but yeah, 100%. War and aftermath of war. So because we deal with such large scale things, it's not like there's this one big epic battle in the past and we don't get any more. Like there's definitely more actual real time battles and wars to come. But yeah, because the books are we've already talked about how much he fits into a book, you get that aftermath as well. So it's not like one set of war and aftermath.
Yeah, normally stories end at the moment that the war ends. Going from experience being in Europe, that the Second World War, okay, that was a moment, but the aftermath is what's talked about more so than the actual war itself sometimes. So it's interesting to see that in a fictional sense, exploring how that happens in a world we don't know, like what is the aftermath of such a place, and having that really be explored in a way that other fantasy I haven't really seen explore.
Sky5 Angel says, I know you just started the Dandelion Dynasty, but I can't wait for you guys to read the Three-Body Problem someday. I've heard a lot about that one. I haven't read it, but I'd definitely be open to that.
Yep. It's supposed to be top tier sci-fi. And Ken Liu also translated that from Chinese. So it's originally Chinese. It's been on my TBR for a long time, but it's like big brain sci-fi. Like you need to be ready to rub your brain cells together. So I've been waiting.
Yeah.
I'm like, when I feel smart, let me pick this up. But yeah, Sarah has been talking about it and saying I need to read it.
Yeah. And for general fact, it's just interesting to read fiction from an Eastern fantasy, because they just have such different ways of thinking that, like, we read books to get into different worlds, but also to get different lines of thinking. Like we understand each other better because we read books and dive into other characters. And I think that's really a strong point of this book to have that being an Eastern author make it so that the different thinking patterns are very much brought up.
Mm. That's a great
Yeah,
point.
we haven't talked on that yet, right? The world building around the different moral codes that you can follow, or the different sages, right? I loved the details of that. And I mentioned earlier about, loving the linguistics, but the details of how logograms are built and what, how different parts add up together. Like the beauty of that was something that you can't get unless someone knows that language intimately, or knows an Eastern language or pictorial language intimately in the way that Ken Liu does. I mean, he translates big brain projects like the Three Body Problem. I think he knows pretty well about language. So you can see that knowledge,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, different topic, but do you guys want to see Pretzel? He's out.
Sure.
You wanna see
Yeah.
him? I have a snake. You don't have a phobia, do you?
No.
Okay, all right. He's out and about, so I thought I'd show him.
Is he
Oh,
getting
what a
bigger?
cutie.
He looks bigger.
Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
he's bigger. Yeah, than the last time he's been on screen. So
Oh, well,
he's still waking up. He's
He
adorable.
has beautiful
Yeah.
patterns.
Thank you. Yeah, he's a lazy boy, but he's cute, so he can get away with anything. So he's just waking up. He'll start moving around soon. But yeah. Anyway, sorry to interrupt. What were we
No,
talking
it's
about?
Good to check in on Pretzel.
Yeah.
Daniel
Welfare
says
check.
yeah, well, for sure. I feel like he teased the House of the Dragons, Kunu style, at the end of this book.
I haven't watched House of the Dragon. I haven't watched it, so I don't know. Is that a spoilery thing if you explain that to me, or?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
But I think just the kind of the ruling and having power and what you do with it and how you maintain it, how you foster it, all that's part of the kind of the House of the Dragons. There's a lot of ruling and maintaining your houses and things like that. Succession. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Our friend Layla says, "I've read the Three Body Problem. It has good concepts to consider. I found if I sit back and think about it, not as complex as Malazan, but I had to think it through cultural references."
Mm-mm-mm.
It's definitely on the
Makes
list of things love to read.
Mm-hmm.
Always too much books to read.
Yeah, definitely. House of the Dragon centers around succession, the succession issue. Yeah.
Can I help you? He's like looking into my eyes. Can I help you, sir? Are you hungry? It's going straight for it. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I think when you are an author who can write, or in this case, if you're, George R. R. Martin is, the person who basically had the basis, right, for House of the Dragon. But if you're an author who's skilled enough to write generational gaps, which I think are quite hard to pull off, but if you can do it, it allows you to really delve into how do power structures survive over time. So I feel like, you have to have those time jumps to be able to really delve into that. So
yeah, and normally we get it across 2 generations, but those 2 generations are still alive and present in the story from the beginning, like a son to a king to a son or something. But yeah, I think because it's so rare to have generational stories is one of the it immediately strikes as something interesting because it's so rare.
Yeah, I don't think it's rare that it exists, but I think it's rare that it's done well, where you're like, okay, this makes sense. I've talked about the Greenbone Saga with Fonda Lee being one of the other series that I think pulls this off in the way that other books haven't for me, where I just end up missing the old characters. I'm like, oh, come back, like, I don't want to read about your son. I don't care about your son, but if it's done well, you're invested in, the legacy there.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
So I guess the next thing is, Hans, what were your final thoughts on this one?
Of the book.
Hmm?
Yeah, I really want to continue this because I want to see how this world continues next. I think just picking this story is already marvelous. Like 50 out of 10. Like it's just one of my favorite fantasy books. So even if it would stop now, I would have been satisfied. So I hope the next installments are gonna expand enough for me to like. Sometimes sequels make the first installment lesser because they continue on with decisions that you think like, no, don't do that. So I hope this story doesn't do that, but that it keeps it great enough. So yeah.
There's gonna be no don't do that moments. I'm just gonna say there's gonna be like no
Yeah.
it's gonna be there. But it has a purpose,
Okay.
but it'll be
Okay.
there.
Yeah.
What about you, Steve?
I really enjoyed it. I was teetering on a kind of my rating if it was like a, it's already up there, but after that's why I love discussions like this, because you think of we discussed things that I hadn't thought of before or didn't really think about. So really, really good. Probably one of my favorites of the year so far.
Yay!
It's
It
up
was
there
one
for
of those
sure.
things where I told Steve so many times, "You're gonna like it. You're gonna like it." I'm just glad that you did in
Yeah.
the end. Um, yeah.
No, good
Well,
stuff.
it's no mystery, that I love it. So, all the books are 5 stars for me. But my favorite book is The Wall of Storms, which is the next one. So,
Yeah.
yes,
Yelena,
they're all
Yelena
5.
says
But
Yelena's told me several times that one is the best one also. So
has she
we'll
finished
see.
yet? Has she read Speaking Bones? And
I think
No, I
she's
don't think so.
just for the first two.
oh, okay.
I think
Yeah,
she
the Veiled Throne.
expressed. I think
Hmm.
she expressed interest to join when we came up to those books, but I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think she's gonna try.
Yeah, I mean, The Veiled Throne and Speaking Bones are both, like I said, 5-star books for me. They're still amazing, and he really sticks the landing, in my opinion. But The Wall of Storms, in my opinion, is like a masterclass of a sequel. It just ups the ante in every way you can possibly imagine. And then you're like, oh, that's why The Grace of Kings is the way it was. You're like, oh, okay, I get it now. So,
Yeah, getting me excited. Yeah,
do you guys have predictions? Or
I have no
are you
idea.
just like, I have no idea?
No. I
have no
Okay.
idea.
Like I said, it's probably going to explore the aftermath of a war and the aftermath of decisions made. So, but apart from that, that could be the first 50 pages for all we know, in a way that the story progresses in this 50 pages. So.
Yeah, the Emperor's gone in the first third, and you're like, well, now what, right? So,
Yeah.
Pretzel, what are you doing?
Good stuff. So Hans, you'll be joining us for the next one?
I would love to. I would love
Cool.
to.
Nice. We don't have a date just yet, but I'll be working on that here this week, so let everybody know.
Yeah, I still have to buy all the books. I saw the last one is not out in Europe yet. Not in paperback at least. Only in the very expensive 30 or 40 bucks hardcover. So we'll see about the last book when we get there.
Yeah, we're probably a couple months away, so by then should have a paperback out.
Yeah.
And don't forget to tell people also, Steve, that Ken Liu will be here for the next discussion.
Yes. Yeah, he wanted to
So.
come after book 2, so that'll be fun. It'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
The author will be here. Woo!
Yeah. Woo.
Fun and scary.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So cool. Well, thanks both of you. Taylor, thanks for hanging out with us. I know that you have a lot going on, so appreciate you taking. And it's not always easy to come and chat about the book when you've read the whole series. So it's hard sometimes to remember what exactly happens. But so thanks for hanging out and chatting with us about it.
Yeah.
You really have to twist my arm to talk about this series. So, if I must.
If I must have this punishment.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Of course, Hans, thanks for hanging out with us too, and thanks for reading with us.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Of course, yeah, anytime. thanks everyone in the chat. It was great to have so much interaction there. So thanks everyone who came by, and I should hopefully have a date for book 2 here soon. So anyone who wants to join us, let us know. Love to have you.
Mm.
Cool. Well, hope
Mhm.
everyone has a good Saturday or wherever it is, wherever you are in the world.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thanks
Yeah,
everybody.
have a nice day, everyone.
All right. See you.
Bye bye.